Hi, I'm James Bennett, and I'm going to show you what I believe I've learned between the making of my preliminary task and the making of my final project, which is a music magazine. The first thing that I had to learn very early on was how to keep track of my time. At the beginning of the year, the beginning of my project, after I'd finished my preliminary task, I was given a long set of deadlines that included deadlines for research, planning, construction and evaluation questions, and I had to make sure I stuck to them. But in the first few weeks, I'll be honest with myself, I did miss a few of these deadlines and did fall slightly behind, as did a few other members of the class. But I soon realised that keeping it on my deadlines not only allowed me to produce my work on time and escape any punishments, but also the most important thing was that it gave me valuable time afterwards to get to perfect my work and make sure that my work was up to the best standard possible and work on the fine details that are required to produce a fantastic music magazine. And so I'm glad that I eventually learned that timekeeping is crucial in order to make a successful music magazine. And I would like to think that by the end of this project I've certainly mastered this technique. One amazing bit of technology that I learned throughout my time making this document was how to become fairly confident with Photoshop. Because if you compare the images in the music magazine, so you got these two here, that one there, and obviously my front cover, compared to my preliminary task images, they're fairly simple in terms of the editing that's been done to them compared to this one. So if I just take you through this one was a lot dark because I took it in an alleyway with a flash on, so automatically the background made it a fairly dark image which is lacking colour, and also when I compared it against my background it just didn't look right, especially these two as well, as you can see there. And so what I did was I just used the colour enhancing tool, I highlighted what I wanted to highlight, and I managed to eventually just slightly brighten this a bit so it blended in with the background. And then these ones I just lightened them so that the man in the image sort of stood out to the background without obviously being too stupid and without being too light. And I think I got quite a nice balance there, and I think the only way I could do that was if I got used to doing it through my preliminary task, because the next tools on Photoshop that I really got used to were the sort of font tools and also the layout of how to sort of plan everything, because in the beginning, if you compare this again, the way I've done this, these aren't in line. If you see there, that's too far that way and that's too inside this way. And also the font I've used is fairly basic, and the colour scheme as well. If you compare it to here, these are perfectly in line, so is that. That's fitting in quite nicely, and the font as well I got from the DaFont website, which is something I didn't really know much about before I started my music magazine. You simply have to just go on there, choose your font, put your words in, see what you like, and then just download it and then just drop it into your Photoshop document. I also tinkered around the colours, just change that so that I've got these three letters highlighted so they could stick out a bit more. Size is different, whereas in here they're all the same size. Fit really basic. That circle again just doesn't look right, it's a bit sort of round. And so yeah, I just feel like in this one I've just done a lot better with the photo editing as well. Like I've cropped them out a lot better. I would like to be honest, if I'd like to go back, I'd like to tinker with this a bit more. But we all make mistakes. What I've done with this, the fact that both these images are perfectly in line, both perfectly sized, that took a lot of fine detail. That was due to my timing, to be honest. I got a lot more time to focus on key little aspects like this, and I also got time to sort of put a lot more effort into lining everything up. And also one thing I did learn was in the beginning on making this, the contents page was bit sort of slapdash, bit sort of all over the place, similar to this here. Like, yeah, I follow the rule of thirds, but this third is bigger than this third and this third, which means you're not really following the rule of thirds. And so if you look here, all these three columns are all exactly the same size, perfectly laid out, allowing me to make sure that everything is in order and not too messy, and looking really organised. Also, I began to add little details in here like the Facebook and Twitter, the subscription, which took a lot of time to get to a decent size without blurring it. And I just think also the front, getting onto a new point, the layout of my front cover. If you look at this one, there's a lot more going on, but it doesn't look messy. That's the big thing, it doesn't look too messy. It's nice and evenly placed on the page. Whereas here, you've only got a few. You've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You've only got about 7 or 8 cover lines. There's just not enough content in there, and also the content titles are fairly basic and vague. Whereas in here, you've got big sort of headings, different size, different colours. Things like the 99 biggest indie hits really sticks out on the page or draws the reader in. And also, it's the what I've mentioned. I've got a variety. I've got big talk with all these different artists, which sort of says that I'm going to be talking about different artists in the magazine. I've then got headlines. I've then got the big, what we could call it the main event, the main sort of topic of my magazine, which is Sam Metz becoming a legend. And I think it's just got a lot more content on here. I've also got the strapline at the top, which is something I didn't really use in the Wilmington magazine, because here, again, it's just taking up far too much space. It's not really giving me any opportunity to write anything else, and it's just lacking. There's a lot of space here, a lot of space here, and you could just put a lot more cover lines in there to improve it really. And so that's what I learned. Also, I learned how to sort of space my page out a lot more, use all the space given to me, and improve the layout. My next point, if you're comparing the contents page layouts, is just the sort of what the images I'm using, and also how to place the images. So, like for example, I thought adding these 2 images almost makes it look like a sort of slideshow up here. I like the idea I've done there, adding them 2 together. And then down here, I made sure not to sort of morph it incorrectly, make sure I didn't stretch it or anything, just kept it fairly simple. Whereas if you look at these images, this image is fairly distorted. I've not put it in properly. It's blurry. It's obviously not been taken very well. This image here, I've stretched him a bit, so he's a bit big there. Obviously, didn't press control when I was moving him around. And this image is a bit round. I don't think it sort of doesn't look like it should be there. It needs a background. He's not been cropped out very well. Sort of lost half his head at the top here. But if you look at these, they're perfectly cropped out. Well, they didn't really need cropping out, to be honest. I gave myself the opportunity to sort of to give myself a nice background, which didn't need cropping out. But also the background links in quite well with the images. And again, I've made sure that that lines up perfectly, and so does that. My next point, which also we could say sort of helps the editing side of it, is the actual pictures I was taking and the way I've taken them. I think also I've begun as I've sort of gone through the sort of as I've gone through the school year, I've realised how important your photography skills are and how sort of comfortable you have to feel with the camera. So to be honest with myself, this picture here is a nice picture, well framed, well lighted, and yeah, I've done well with that. But if you compare these pictures here, these are just awful. The placing of them, the lighting of things like this image here and this image down here are just really poor compared to the images on my contents page. These are perfectly lighted, making sure that even though I have done a bit of editing to them, perfectly lighted, making sure that he can sort of stand out, but the light in the background still doesn't sort of overpower him. Also nicely placed, shows he's got a bit of character, making sure that the Cool Story Bro Tell It Again logo is nicely shown without being overpowering. And I've made sure down here the facial expression he's pulled looks rather controversial. Shows again he's got a bit of a personality, and but also a bit sinister to him as well, which I like. So I made sure there's a bit more sort of feeling behind the images, whereas in these, I know it's harder because it's a school magazine and there's less to do with it, but the images are fairly basic, no real facial expressions, a sort of slight smile from the 2 girls there. The image down here as well is just too small. There's almost sort of no point of having it there because you couldn't really do much with it, and it's a bit distorted as well. And I think also, just going back to this, the fact, again, like I said, facial expression, poor, is not really making much of an impact. The next point that I had to learn very early on was the idea of props. I learned from Miss McClucky, my teacher, that props are just a bit of a no-go when it comes to music magazines. I did a lot of research and I found that there's hardly any magazines at all who use props. if you compare these, there's one prop there, and a prop there, and a prop there. So, and there. So every image has a prop, whereas in these, you could really say that he's using the jumper as a prop. He's not really. So I've not really got any props at all in my pictures, which is what I wanted. So it just makes sure that that nothing takes away the limelight from the actual image itself. Because if you think in here, I think the folder and the ball and the other folder here are really sort of beginning to overpower the main object of the picture, which is the people involved with the picture. And so this is why it's so crucial that in these images, I think the facial expression is also what's the powerful part of these images, and not the sort of silly props that go along with them. The next point I'd like to talk about is the idea of setting up a unified house style, which is something that I believe I sort of failed to do in my Wilmo catch-up piece, but I certainly did with my music magazine. If you look here, there's colours like the yellow, there's the dark navy that's been taken from the badge. Then you've got things like burgundy as well, you've got the light blue, and if you compare that, it's not followed up in the next page. Yeah, you've got the navy, but then you've got all the different colours coming from these images down here, and there's no unified house styles, or loads of different colours which are struggling to keep up with each other, and it just looks like a bit of a sort of mess on the page. Whereas if you compare that to these two pages, it's quite clear there's two colours that stand out, and that is the gold and the white here, and these two colours are featured throughout both pages in order to create that unified house style. I think it's the problem is in these two pages it's very messy because there's so many different colours used, and I think what I had to learn very quickly was that less is more. If you use less sort of colours, less ideas, you can just use them a lot more throughout the document, and that can eventually pay off. And that's what I definitely did here, because using these two simple colours has enabled me to create that sort of clear. It's almost like it's just one big page, and so you need to make sure that someone could pick this page up and know there's a contents page just for this front page, if it makes sense. They need to correlate, whereas these are two very different. The content's still the same, but these two different pages are two very different in terms of the colour scheme and the way they're worked out. And so that's why I had to make sure when creating my contents page, I was sticking to these core colours of gold and white, with a little bit of black as well, which is featured throughout this. But yeah, mainly sticking to the core skills and core colours of gold and white, which are crucial in order to create the unified house style. One thing that I believe was crucial in the making of a magazine was the research and planning that I put into it, and I think that really sort of held me in good stead when it came to actually making the final product. The research and planning that I did